What a Strange Little Colt. Written by Linwood. Chapter 14. The Second Choice, Part 2.
Hello, Gabriel.
He looked back down at their hooves, still clasped together.
You didn't... Oh my god. Did I...
He trailed off, leaving his mouth gaping open. The princess nodded and very slowly, very gently released his hoof. He drew it towards himself, looking at it in shock.
No. No, this isn't right.
Luna's face fell immediately. She saw Rainbow pull her head back, and though her smile remained, it faltered, and her eyebrows drew together.
What?
She said as she wiped most of the snot from her muzzle with the back of her hoof. Gabriel's eyes narrowed.
This wasn't supposed to happen,
he said, his voice gaining an edge.
I figured it out. I did.
The Dan Pegasus mare stepped closer, drawing Luna's attention.
Gabriel, what do you mean? I figured out what I was supposed to do.
His voice gained heat with every word.
The whole reason I'm here. I fixed it. I brought you here by accident, little one,
Luna said.
No, that's not...
He growled, staring down at his hooves, still in Rainbow's grasp.
I'm not supposed to be here. You were dying, and I was supposed to save you and set things right. This isn't the way it's meant to be.
Luna recoiled, pulling a hoof to her chest and feeling utterly lost. The Colt was ranting now. How could he know the way things were meant to be?
Unless... Gabe, you're not making any sense.
Rainbow looked worried now. She tried to tighten her grip on the foal like she was about to lose him again, but he pushed her hug away with both forelegs and continued, his voice rising.
No, none of you get it.
He pressed his hooves into the bit of the Pegasus fluff on his chest.
I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not one of you. I should have never met you,
he said, jabbing hoof vaguely outwards at the ponies.
I am a violent, messed up joke compared to you. But what matters is that me being here is wrong.
His eyes shimmered and his voice wavered, barely holding out with his last words. Luna's open mouth slowly closed into a frown, then thinned into a line. Something about his wording, the way he spoke about himself like he posed a danger to some kind of ideal, scratched at the back of Luna's mind. She knit her brow.
Oh dear.
The unnamed Pegasus mare walked up to the little foal, kneeling in the used-up casting chalk. She met his gaze with her wide, soft, remarkably blue eyes. She clearly cared about him a great deal.
Gabriel, what do you mean? Can you help me understand?
He stammered, struggling to keep his voice level.
I'm not supposed to be here,
he repeated.
I'm not like you all. I don't belong.
With that, his chin dropped and his foreleg drew close to his body, like he wanted to shrink until he popped into nothingness. And he spoke in a very quiet voice.
I'm just gonna mess everything up even more if I'm around.
No pony spoke. Luna's eyes widened as she recalled his then final words to her, spoken with a heavy heart as she laid in her bed, too weak to move or even speak, dying without even realizing it.
He knew of us,
she realized.
Somehow, he knew. He watched our past. He knew of this world before he ever set hoof here. But it does not make sense that he fears his actions may affect what he believes how this world is supposed to be. Unless...
Luna started, gasping a tiny, unnoticed breath.
Unless he's watched our future as well.
Her eyes darted to the tiny little foal sitting in Rainbow's grasp.
What does this Colt know? Gabe,
Rainbow said with surprising gentleness. The Pegasus tucked the edge of her hoof underneath the Colt's chin, raising his face to meet hers.
if having you around is messing things up, then that's how I want it to be. As messed up as possible.
He looked up to her, shocked once again.
What? Really? Of course,
The Tan Mare said.
I've told you this before, and I'll tell you again. Just because you've done bad things in the past, doesn't mean you don't deserve a second chance.
She put her hoof on his shoulder.
And you do deserve a second chance. Even if you used to look different. We're here for you, Gabriel. But what if things go wrong?
He said, worry dripping from his voice. Luna felt some of the uncertainty that had filled her heart upon her realization melt away.
That he cares so much about our fates.
Rainbow sniffed a little, still with that smile on her face.
Dude, things always go wrong. When they do, we'll handle it. Together. And,
Luna said.
if there's some way things are meant to be, then I believe that this is how they shall be, regardless of your presence.
Gabriel looked up at her. She saw confusion briefly, then an understanding filled his eyes. Then he looked down, blinking hard and rubbing at his face with his foreleg.
Okay,
He said, still sounding unsure of himself. Then he sniffed, looked up at Rainbow Dash, and he spoke with stone in his voice.
Yeah. Okay.
Rainbow chuckled a little, her face still matted with dry tears.
Come here, you.
She wrapped him in another embrace, and this one he accepted, leaning into her fur with the smallest smile on his lips. Luna felt her heart begin to melt at the relief of it all, right up until Rainbow looked at him in his deep brown eyes and cleared her throat.
Now, you better be ready for this,
she said, raising her hoof. Gabriel had just enough time to look surprised. Clunk went his skull.
Ah, fuck! Ow!
His hoof shot out and he tumbled onto his back.
Rainbow! You little brat!
The Pegasus yelled, standing up with a small puff of chalk dust. The remains of the used-up magic circle crisscrossed her rear, making patterns over her cutie mark.
What in Tartarus made you come up with that stupid plan?
She smacked him again, and he held up his forelimbs over his head.
You massive idiot! Going and getting yourself killed without even saying goodbye? I swear to Celestia, I'll make you wish you were never born!
Clunk. The aforementioned mare took a step back, her eyes wide and slightly concerned, and Luna couldn't help but to crack a tiny, relieved smile.
Yeah, Rainbow, Jesus fuck, I'm sorry, ow! I said I was fucking sorry!
The tan Pegasus mare stepped in.
Rainbow, stop. I think you got the message. Fine.
Rainbow said, lowering her hoof.
He better have. Yeah, no, loud and clear.
Gabriel said, sitting up and rubbing his skull, his coat caked in exhausted magic chalk.
I guess I kinda deserve that.
Dash rolled her eyes.
Kinda.
Still, Luna saw a smile. Hold on, said the black and white unicorn, stepping forward and earning a withering glare from Rainbow and the Pegasus mare. The former shifted to replace herself between him and Gabriel. Princess Celestia, he began. How do we know that it really is him there? Couldn't you have summoned another soul by accident? Celestia looked at him.
Actually, Investigator Looking Glass, I believe my sister is better qualified to answer that question.
When Celestia looked to her, Luna felt her heart drop. The knowledge that allowed her to answer the stallion's question was the same expertise she'd used to cause it all.
I've performed a lot of very dangerous magic that was outlawed for good reason.
The tension and relief drained from her body, and the cold, nervous guilt that she'd pushed to the back of her mind rushed to take its place. Luna noticed that everybody had their eyes on her. and she forced herself to speak.
Well, investigator.
Luna said.
Interlopers are normally created when something similar to a soul, but otherworldly, joins a pony's own soul, initially without changing the mind or body. It is from there the presence usually takes control.
She nodded at the Colt.
From what I can tell, Gabriel here is made of a constructed pony body, his unique presence and a piece of my own soul.
He glanced at Celestia.
As well as a piece of my sister's. All the pieces already here. There was no retrieval from the stars of any kind. Wait!
Twilight cried, looking very alarmed.
Princess Celestia? You really put a piece of your own soul?
She stared at her mentor and looked utterly flabbergasted.
Yes, my little pony,
Celestia said with a gentle yet knowing chuckle of hers.
A small piece, much smaller than he had before, and I believe was done properly. And you'll be alright? I feel a little weakened, but yes, all three of us will be okay. With Luna's piece and mine together, I think Gabriel should be able to live perfectly normally. Luna, do you think so? Yes, I do. Though, I wonder if having two pieces of two different souls will yield any side effects. Wow, thanks. Both of you,
said Gabriel, his eyes wide.
That's a really high price to pay for one person. Like, really high.
He shrugged.
I don't really know what to say, really.
Luna smiled sadly.
You saved my life, little one, from a grievous mistake that I made. You had no obligation to do so,
she said.
So it was only right that I save yours. Huh.
Gabriel stayed silent for a moment. He looked down at his hooves, flipping them over and inspecting them from every angle.
So, what's next? What's next?
Rainbow took a deep breath. It helped to keep her hooves from shaking. Helped, but didn't stop. She looked down on her foreleg and watched it twitch. Everything felt off. Her fur tingled and her ears twitched, trying to find sounds that weren't there. Her heartbeat was too slow, or was it too fast?
It's too dark in here. Not enough light.
A spark of fear leapt to life in her tired chest, and she looked right back to Gabriel. He was still there, looking up at her. That unreadable expression in those eyes that managed to be sharp and soft, and warm and cold, and distant and close all at once.
He's real. He's really safe. He's really okay.
The slowly dying whirlwind of emotions inside her leapt up one more time, and she hooked her foreleg around his withers and hugged Gabe close again, feeling his fur against her chest.
He's okay.
She took another deep breath, and another. With each one, she felt a little more solid in her stance, a little more physical, a little more real. Rainbow had no idea what would come next.
But I know what I want.
She smirked a bit at the way she insisted Gabe would just be a temporary job. How she cringed when ponies called him her kid. All those worries seemed so far away. Even when AJ and Rarity would inevitably tease her about it, Rainbow knew it just bounced right off after what she'd been through.
But what about Twilight?
She took a moment to look away from Gabe and study Twilight. She looked like she'd fall apart at any second. There was relief there, sure, but she looked like her worries were far from over. Rainbow remembered the burning, all-consuming rage that had filled her not so long ago. She'd been ready to tear her apart, her and that scum Looking Glass. But now she just felt tired, empty. How could Twilight do such a horrible thing to her own friend? Something in the back of her mind whispered that Twilight had her reasons, as awful as they were, and, in the end, Gabe was okay. And that was what mattered. On top of that, Twilight didn't look proud, or happy, or even very relieved. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was all the moments of friendship they had shared. But Rainbow found that, for whatever reason, she didn't like seeing that very much. Twilight looked up at her, and Rainbow held her eye for a second before looking away, back to Gabe.
He's okay. He's here,
she thought.
Gabe's okay, but Twilight's gonna have a lot to answer for. She doesn't deserve it, but maybe I'll hear her out, eventually. She'd better stay out of my way until I'm good and ready, though. What's next?
Sandy Hill's smile faded. For the first time since she thought she'd lost her job, the world gave her a moment to think, to consider what was really going on. So much had changed in the past 2 hours or so. The presence of the 2 rulers of her entire country standing in the room with her, scarcely a step away, hit her first. A bolt of lightning ran through her body, from the top of her skull down to the tip of her tail. She thought.
Should I be bowing, groveling, begging for forgiveness for standing in Princess Luna's bedroom?
She felt her heart begin to race and the telltale urge to bolt, but the counselor reminded herself to take a deep breath. After all, the so-called investigator Looking Glass stood in the room too, looking similarly dumbfounded. If they haven't given that snake the swift kick in the rear, well, she saw no reason to leave. The counselor's thoughts began to move forward. She had her job, still, and as far as any pony outside the freaking princess's bedroom knew, she still bore responsibility for Gabriel's care. She relaxed a little as she considered the answers she'd finally gotten. Gabe wasn't even from Equestria. She no longer needed to worry about tracking down family or a town called Westfield, and thankfully, the whole escapade had ejected her full trafficker theory clear out the window. All that was left was a wildly uncertain future, all wrapped up and conveniently presented in that short 2-word question. The sight of Rainbow standing next to Gabriel, still staring like she couldn't believe that he was really back, banished the uncertainty in Sandy's heart.
My goodness. What if the princess hadn't been able to do anything? I don't even want to imagine what that would have done to Rainbow.
Sandy smiled, relishing the feeling that she wouldn't need to worry about the stack of unsent foster request letters sitting at her desk. It seemed Gabriel had found a home here in Equestria. However, that didn't mean he was ready to go it alone. No matter the age, no matter where the damage had come from, Gabriel still bore deep scars, and it was her job to help him.
I may be trained as a full counselor, but I can learn.
She raised her head, confidence flowing through her like liquid sunshine. The road ahead promised a lot of work to do, but if all of this hadn't stopped her, nothing could.
I can do it. What's next?
Twilight Sparkle felt her heart finally slow from the frantic pace it'd been sustaining all day.
It's over. We did it.
She forced herself to breathe deeply. Princess Luna was okay. They saved her. No, Gabriel had saved her. And in turn, she had saved him. It had all worked out.
So, why doesn't it feel like we won?
Twilight already knew why.
It's because I messed up. It's because I really messed up. It's because I really, really messed up.
Her eyes flicked over the Colt. He looked so normal, sitting there next to Rainbow. And Twilight could hardly imagine him as the same breed of creature as those pictures she had seen in Anima Thaumaturgia. Twilight had, moments ago, watched him crumple at the idea of ruining the world he'd been forced into. She'd seen him receive a dose of righteous fury from a rainbow so relieved she didn't quite know how to show it. But most of all, she saw some pony. No, someone unsure of what the future held. Twilight still couldn't shake the feeling that had gripped her heart when Gabriel had spoken to her at the party. What was it that he said?
Something really bad happened to my home. A really bad disaster, I guess. I'd like to think that it'll turn out okay.
And then he looked at her, as if he watched everything he loved get torn away from him right before his eyes.
I doubt I'll ever forget it. But I was more afraid of it than anything. How did I get so carried away? At least Spike is still with me.
She smiled a little as she looked down at the little dragon, saddled up against her with one arm around her foreleg. He looked up and gave her an uncertain smile. He only added to the dark, cold pit in Twilight's stomach.
I wonder, would you be so eager if it were Foal's life on the line? Or how about Spike, Twilight?
The mare shivered. She'd been so sure, so positively sure of herself until that moment. Those words had sent Spike straight into her chest, and her breath had failed her.
Would I be willing?
Twilight found she couldn't quite answer that question. A coldness permeated her body now, but she still felt hot and uncomfortable. She felt physically sick at the thought, no, the memory of what she'd been trying to do to someone willing to sacrifice themselves for a pony they'd never meet. Without the desperate pressure to succeed, it all felt wrong. Twilight looked up at Rainbow, whose mane stuck up in all sorts of odd angles and manners of cowlick. Her face looked so different from the angry, desperate, fearful sneer she'd given her as she fought the inevitable. She remembered the shock, hurt, and betrayal that filled her chest.
All for trying to save Princess Luna?
She forced her eyes away.
No, of course not. It was for lying to her face and trying to take him away.
Now she'd ruined her friendship, and possibly even more. What would happen when some other real monster reared its head, and the only answer was the elements of harmony? What would happen then? They'd be broken. That's what. But even the idea of failing to use the elements paled at the prospect of permanently losing one of her closest friends. When she looked back at Rainbow, Twilight's heart fell even further at the sidelong glance Rainbow was giving her. Nervous, upset, but most of all, distrustful.
I've been a terrible, horrible friend.
She lowered her head. Now that it was all over, it seemed so stupid. Stupid! How had she let herself get so carried away?
Can I even make it up to Rainbow? Can we still be friends?
Twilight pulled Spike closer.
Maybe not,
She thought.
but I'm still going to try. What's next?
Princess Celestia for once found herself processing the situation at the same pace as any other pony or person in the room. A truly rare occurrence. She let herself breathe a sigh of relief, thankful that the situation had not imploded and Gabriel had not ended up forcing her hoof.
That could have been messy, but thank goodness Luna is safe. Even as well as this has turned out, I have quite a bit on my plate.
Celestia glanced at her investigator, who seated himself the furthest from the Colt. From what she understood, he pushed the hardest for Gabriel's death, almost to the point of bloodthirstiness. She suspected he was the reason for her students' willingness to go through with a surprisingly vicious plan, and that simply wouldn't do.
I have worked too hard grooming Twilight to value friendship above all, and today has been something of a step backwards.
She see to it that he be removed from the Royal Bureau of Investigation as soon as possible, and a more detailed, level-headed account on the incident would help her determine the necessity of a possible imprisonment. She certainly wouldn't have him interact with Twilight or her friends any further.
That fanatical lack of empathy is far too dangerous. I'll have to keep a close eye on him.
However, he demonstrated a remarkably strong loyalty to the crown, and, in that end, she couldn't deny that Looking-Glass had done everything he could to get his job done. The job she'd sent his way in the first place.
I can think of a few tasks well suited for a stallion of his nature.
He certainly hijacked Twilight cleanly enough. Her student had been far too willing to burn some very important bridges on her way of fulfilling Celestia's mission.
I was aware that she thinks highly of me, but this is too much. Practically blind worship. It's good that this incident has not been far-reaching, but if she is so easily led astray... Well, she'll need help to fix that little issue of hers. A doable task, but it will take time. Thank goodness Twilight didn't directly do anything illegal.
Celestia believed that cleaning up the sizable mess she'd made would be penance enough, and coming before a court of law would only hinder things in the long run. Celestia was sure the elements would react in their own dramatic fashions.
Learning a friend is capable of such dark deeds can do that.
Yes, there would be problems, but she was confident that between Twilight's efforts and some healthy nudges, the friendship could be repaired with all of them, even Rainbow Dash, though that particular relationship would take much more time and effort. She glanced at Luna, who still stared, bewildered at the Colt. Celestia's shoulders fell at that. Her sister had broken down, and on top of that, she committed a crime and used illegal magic. That was the long and short of it. There would need to be action. But imprisonment or another banishment was out of the question.
I won't do that again.
But Luna was currently unfit to rule. That much was obvious. She needed attention and help, and keeping it all under wraps would be fickle. But if Celestia wasn't capable of keeping her little sister safe, then no pony was.
And I am plenty capable. I will work something out. I'll keep a close eye on her, and I will be spending much more time with Luna from now on. I won't make that mistake a third time. Ouch.
That just left the Colt of the hour. Celestia hesitated as she weighed her options, her face outwardly calm and relieved, save for the tiny, almost unnoticeable creeping together of her eyebrows. Perhaps it was the centuries of ruling instilling a healthy sense of skepticism, but the mere fact that this foal did not have the otherworldly powers or magic did not entirely satisfy the small, yet persistent part of her brain that constantly whispered, but what if it is dangerous? Otherworldly knowledge, however, was an entirely different game. After she had sent her letter, Celestia had gotten a chance to speak with the Colt, and the picture he painted of his home had not been pretty. He had spoken in a hollow voice of strange places, hard times, and very, very terrifying machines. Though he had been vague and evasive, she had gleaned enough from his description. Some kind of terrible conflict had taken place, and from it had sprung horrors that scarred this being to his very core. Such things made Celestia concerned, to say the least. Gabriel was truly well-meaning, that she could see plain as day, and he really did deserve this second chance. But if she said that and Luna were the only reason she helped revive the Colt, well, Celestia would be lying. She had no way of ensuring his alien knowledge wasn't dangerous, or potentially valuable. Perhaps he carried only small things, insights and darker lessons passed to him from a life of unknown hardships. Or, possibly, and as Celestia suspected, he knew some things that were not so small. Because of all the questions she had gently steered Gabriel into answering, the one he had not so subtly avoided was scale. Without that crucial piece, Celestia would have found many of her assumptions about Gabriel's people and their capabilities be nothing more than mostly baseless conjecture, and that was no way to analyze the potential threat or advantage that the products of such a world would create. But that was just a possibility. The gaping hole in her knowledge of his home bothered her to no end, much like the strange way Gabriel interacted with the world around him. Why did he speak to her so casually? How did he know about Dragonfire messages? Yes, these could be explained away with brash confidence and a quick ear, but they still struck her as distinctly off. She couldn't rid herself of the discomfort of such incongruencies brought on, and over a millennium of experience had taught her not to ignore such feelings. The Colt hid more than one secret, to be sure, and Celestia hated being kept out of secrets, especially ones that involved her.
Unfortunately,
Celestia thought to herself,
there is not much I can currently do besides observe.
up until the day Gabriel had escaped her scrutiny. From now on, she'd be more careful. She would be patient. She would work, though it would require a special subtlety. That knowledge would come to her eventually.
After all, it cost me a piece of my soul.
The princess cleared her throat.
I believe that is up to you, Gabriel,
Said Celestia.
I do not believe we can return you to your world, but I see no problem with letting you do as you choose here.
She shot Luna a sly look.
I believe my sister might even let you stay here in the palace, if you ask her nicely enough. Silly, you know me far too well.
Luna thought. Gabriel screwed up his muzzle.
I thought I might be stuck here, but that's okay.
Then he looked up, inspecting each of the ponies in the room with an even stare. His gaze landed on the nearby Rainbow, who was shifting her weight from hoof to hoof.
And, as generous as your offer is, I think I'd like to go back to Ponyville and keep living with Rainbow. I got a big fluffy cloud bed there, and after today, it's calling my name.
Dash's face burst into a wide grin and she scooped him up with another tight hug.
Got it, kid. I knew you'd make the right call.
Wheezed Gabriel.
Just don't smack me up again. Don't go die on me and I'll consider it.
Luna smiled, as did most of the rest of the room. Twilight even scooped her dragon up into her own hug. Really, the only pony who looked downright miserable was the stallion, who sat the furthest away from every pony else.
I wonder why.
Still, the princess felt happy for the colt, truly, and it was clear that the two ponies before her had a special bond that shouldn't be broken, but a part of her wanted the strange foal to stay here. It clearly wasn't meant to be, though, and maybe that was for the best. Luna still needed to finish cleaning up her mess and face what she'd done. True, she was a princess, but she had no doubt Celestia had lost a good deal of confidence in her. Confidence that Luna couldn't claim to deserve. Her smile grew a little, but if an odd yet kind stranger from another world could want to be her friend, then not all hope was lost. Maybe one day, in the next few years, she'd meet somebody who could see past.
Can you visit?
Luna blinked.
What?
The little green foal continued, keeping his eyes locked directly on hers. They whined a moment later as if realization of what he had just asked.
If it's, possible, maybe. Me?
She said dumbly, as if it was all her brain could offer. That brought out an awkward chuckle.
Yeah, you. The one who literally brought me back from the dead just now.
He said, as if it was perfectly obvious that he would want one of the diarchs of Equestria to come to Boneyville and visit him. Going by the looks of the faces of Rainbow Dash, Twilight Sparkle, Spike, and two ponies whose names she didn't know, they didn't exactly expect this either.
Can you?
Luna's eyes widened.
I've never gotten this far. What do normal ponies say to something like that?
She shot a desperate look at the mildly surprised Celestia, who, of course, took a moment to chuckle at her expense before nodding. Luna turned back to Gabriel, still looking a little shocked.
Well, yes? Oh, great!
He gave her a wide grin.
I thought I broke you there for a second.
Then he groaned, scratching his legs one by one.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but between the storm and all of this, I really am tired.
He twisted his neck with a cascade of pops and crackles.
I don't suppose we have time to catch a train home? Oh, yes, please. That sounds nice,
said the wilting Pegasus mare, whose name remained a mystery to Luna.
I really ought to ask. Ha!
Rainbow laughed.
Whenever you want, kiddo.
The two shared one more hug, and then they separated. Rainbow stood a hoof on his shoulder, and they shared a look that filled Luna's heart with a special kind of warmth. Gabriel looked so comfortable, so hopeful, and Rainbow, well, her smile was truly motherly. Then she smacked him again.
Now, fucker!
Luna couldn't help but to laugh. Here we are, guys. One more chapter to go. The epilogue. Wow. I can't believe I've honestly managed to pump out this much this quickly and to finish a story. It's gonna be weird to go back to the regular schedule and not have What a Strange Little Cult content on there. But hey, one more chapter before we get all the sappy, lovey-dovey, oh my gosh, this fic was so good. But I do want to point out, I do have a new mic for this. I upgraded from the AT2035 to the AT5050, or 1850? Whatever. I got an upgrade for it, so hey, if this sounds better, let me know. I can't really tell post-process. It does sound better on the editing part over here, but video loss and all that stuff. So tell me what you guys think. But aside from that, I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Redeemer of Dark, Jason, Chase Lemaster, Lunar Gaze, Hyperling, 8 Day of Night, Starlight Blaze, Night in Game, Dreamless Portal, and Balance Kindness. And a new tier 1, I'm gonna screw this up, a Mist Dwell Era. It's all one word, so a Mist Dwell Era? Thank you for your support, friend. I really do appreciate it. A thank you to my tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, The Animated Ghost, Solus, HKH4, aka Texture, Sword Brother and Mordred, Nocturne, DJMX 2000, Papa Lennon, Can Panzer, Elemental Wolf, and H1 Wolf King. And of course a large thank you to my Titan tiers, User 1842, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and Silent Titan. I appreciate every single one of your guys' support so much, and it really does mean a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.